With this session update, I'm Shannon Lurkey. A bipartisan group of lawmakers called for legislation that would allow student athletes to be compensated for their name, image, and likeness. Here's that press conference.
Thank you very much. Glad to see some folks stayed around, so thank you very much for being here. Today, Senator Chamberlain and I would like to talk about the name, image, likeness bill that we are both running in the concurrently in the House and in the Senate. And so the name, image, likeness bill is to get the NCAA to come to the table and discuss how fair it is to pay players. So you might be familiar with the Fair Pay to Play Act for collegiate athletes that passed in California last year in 2019. Currently, there are 15 states that are either have passed or are going through the process of passing a similar bill to get the NCAA to come to the table and get rules around how to fairly pay players as college athletes. And so what our bill does is it works with post-secondary institutions to be compensated so that student athletes can be compensated for their name, image, or likeness, and additionally allows student athletes to obtain professional representation in relation to contracts or legal matters. And further, it forbids post-secondary institutions, conferences, or organizations with authority over intercollegiate sports from preventing students from being compensated or obtaining representation. It additionally prohibits those organizations from compensating student athletes for their name, image, or likeness. And so this is an issue, as Senator Chamberlain will talk to, about fairness and about making sure that our student athletes, who there are a tremendous number of folks who are making a significant amount of money on these student athletes, get some sort of payment for their extensive work. And so there have been many, many issues and many stories that have come out over the last few years. This is an issue that's been around and discussed for a really long time, but California really put it into overdrive for getting a topic of conversation, and Minnesota wants to be part of that to make sure that our universities are able to recruit and make sure that our universities in Minnesota are able to have a fair playing field for competing for students to come to our colleges, because it will very much put Minnesota out of balance if we do not have some sort of fair pay to play act in place. And so now I'll let Senator Chamberlain talk a little bit more about the bill and what we want to have happen.
Thank you very much. So first, I'll have to say that you can see we're bipartisan. We got Representative West, Representative Herr, Representative Tabke, and myself. Yesterday, we had a hearing in the Senate. The House will have one today. Our intent is to get this bill picked up and back to the floor and get a vote on it and passed out. Representative Tabke did a good job explaining the heart and the idea behind this concept, especially with the part about if we don't do this and other states do, then we will lose out on recruiting. But at the heart and soul of this, the core of this, the foundation is something all of you can understand, all of us can understand. If you work, you are entitled to get paid for your labor and your talent. That's it. All other excuses, all other questions fall back to that thing. If a player is on the field, and because they're on the field and they are playing well and performing well, people want to watch that game, they pay to watch it. By going to the game, then they buy hot dogs, and they buy, well, not in college stadiums, but they buy sodas, they go to the bars, they buy the jerseys, and the media contracts. This is multiple billions of dollars across the country for this industry, so they are entitled to get some of that. Now, there are other issues that fall below that that have to be dealt with, but it all comes back to that. They're not insurmountable, but those players on the field, on the court, on the rink, whether it's women or men, lacrosse, soccer, football, or basketball, they're entitled to their fair share of this. The universities and colleges aren't paying it. This is about third parties' endorsements and collecting money from a Coke or a Nike or something of that sort. I have an example in the testimony in the hearing yesterday on some research that our talented staff did. They found that there was a case in 2000, I think it was 2009, a former NCAA basketball player had graduated, but they were still using his name and image in a video game to sell the video game. He sued, won the first level of the lawsuit, but then on appeal, they said, well, it's amateurism. What happens to amateurism? They were using him to sell the product. And but for him, they don't sell the product. So, last word, Amateurism, if you think, there is no amateurism in this anymore. It is professional, it's big money, and the only ones that aren't entitled to make money as student athletes, as students, are the athletes. If you're a journalist and you're in school, you're welcome to go out and get a contract writing a book or freelance. But if you're a college athlete, you can't do that. That's a no-no, and you get fined. So we're in this for the bottom line. What is fair, right, and true and just? That's making sure that these players are paid in some way, get compensated for their talent and labor. Thank you. I give it back to you.
Thank you very much, sir. At this point, we'll take any questions that people have.
You touched on this a little bit, but are you worried about this change affecting the character of the game?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. The character of the game has already been changed. There's big money very much involved in collegiate athletics, and so it has already happened. And right now, as Senator Chamberlain discussed, the only people not profiting from that are the athletes themselves, and so that character has been changed. There's been one of the concerns that some folks have about the bill is changing the character of the teams and making sure that if one player has a significant contract or whatever is happening on that, let's say the quarterback on a football team, and the other players aren't getting that kind of thing, will that cause issues and will that cause concerns within the team? And those are what we have with this bill is we've set an effective date of January 1 of 2023. And so what the reasoning for that is that it gives the NCAA time to work and time to figure out what sort of rulemaking that they have already begun that process, but this holds their feet to the fire to make sure that they come up with these rules to help figure out how to work with those things. And I sincerely hope that they come up with some sort of sharing that makes sure that the teams are equal, taken care of, not necessarily equally, but making sure that everyone gets some sort of benefit from those types of programs that are happening. So there is a lot that the NCAA, it's a tall task that the NCAA needs to take forward, and this has been something that's been coming, like I said earlier, for decades, and we hope that they really get that figured out, and that's why we have an effective date of January 1 of 23.
Senator Chamberlain, what is the reception of Republicans in the Senate? It's going to get a hearing. What are you hearing?
It's an excellent question. The reception is good. It's new territory, and at the hearing yesterday, there was a political scandal that had to be dealt with. But at the hearing yesterday, all the members in the committee, they were not opposed to it. They wanted more information. They had good questions. It was a good discussion. So what we're going to do is get some more information, let it soak in, and we'll be able to move it forward. But people are open to it. I mean, there is some opposition. I've had a few people say it's the worst thing ever. Well, it's not. I mean, certainly not that. But there is some opposition. But overall, from the committee, there was no opposition. Just want to think about it, and I'll talk to them more about it to allay some of their fears and concerns.
And was this up last year, and how far did it get?
No, this bill was not up last year. This was just introduced this year. Senator Chamberlain and I were working on it through the summer, and Representative West here as well has had definitely had a hand in figuring out how everything can move forward. So we really thank him for that. And so yeah, this is a fresh bill this year.
How does it look in the House?
Yeah, in the House we have a hearing today, and so we'll know more then. So we have a hearing this afternoon, and everything that I've gotten from folks is significantly positive. Everyone has questions and concerns about how this can move forward, and that is the major thing with this, is that we need the NCAA to really stand up and make decisions as to how pairs can be paid fairly for their work. And so that's until the NCAA comes forward and comes with those decisions and that rulemaking, that this is going to be a question. And what our bill does is it makes sure that that happens, at least for Minnesota colleges.
So the NCAA would have to, under your bill, the NCAA would have to make this all right. They'd have to legalize it too, or?
Yeah, so the NCAA has already, after the California Fair Pay to Play Act was passed and signed into law in California, the NCAA very quickly came to the forefront and said that this is something that we want to and work on. They had a unanimous decision that said that that's what they want to do. Now they need to actually do that. And unless all the states come together, this is something that many states say should be a federal solution, and I don't disagree with that at all, but until the federal government acts, it's incumbent upon the states to really get some things done to protect our players.
If the NCAA doesn't move, could Minnesota, by passing this bill, require that apart from the NCAA?
Yes, that's what our bill does. Is it requires as it happens as of January 1 of 2023, and we need the NCAA and players associations to work together to get these details figured out as to where to draw the lines in the sand and where to figure out. There's a gymnast that just over the weekend, she had a floor routine that was amazing to a Beyonce song, and it went viral, and you couldn't be on social media without seeing it. And so gymnasts, especially a lot of female athletes, there aren't many professional programs to go to after they're done with their collegiate career. And so I firmly believe that this gymnast should be able to capitalize on that viral content, because she worked really hard for years and years to be as good of a gymnast as she is. And this is one of her only opportunities to capitalize on that financially. And I think it's the right thing to do.
Can you speak to how this would break out across brackets or different levels of academic, or not academic, but athletic skills?
Yep. It would. Do you want to answer this? Or?
Sure.
Yeah.
It would be the same across all divisions. I don't see why there would be a difference. Obviously, if you're a top recruit for whatever sport, you're going to go to a school that wants you. You're going to try to get the best deal. And that's just the way life is. Not everybody can be a rocket scientist or a brain surgeon or an astronaut. And so players go where they can play and where they can get good academics. That's the bottom line. So I think, as Representative Tabke just mentioned with the gymnasts, this can be positive opportunities for female athletes and for smaller schools as well. All across the board, they can and should be able to take advantage of this opportunity. And I guess the word I like to use, and I forgot to use it in the opening, is this is exploitation of their labor. This is exploitation of labor of these athletes. It's nothing else. So I'm hopeful the universities and everybody else will jump on board. I do thank God that California did this, because honestly, if California hadn't, they got the weight and the leverage. Many of the other states wouldn't be able to do it on their own, and I have no doubt the NCAA would have sued us if we stepped out on our own. But it has to change. It has to change. This is not 1980 where we had Miracle on Ice with all those amateur athletes on the ice. It has to change, and I think this is positive. I thank Representative West and her and Tapke and others for taking it up and going forward with it.
Have you heard anything yet from Minnesota schools? Do they like this plan?
I'll just say that I have heard from, I'm sure Representative Tapke and others have as well, but I did talk to University of Minnesota. They came to us and chatted. They're not opposed to it. There was good information from them. They talked to us about the timeline of the NCAA and how that's going to work out. And that's why I think the effective date in our bill is good. It takes advantage of California, plus gives the NCAA time to do their thing. But the university said they're not opposed to it. They just say they have to work out some details and want time. But rest assured, and I'll be completely honest, because that's kind of what I like to do, I don't trust the NCAA, nor should anybody in this audience or listening to this thing. The NCAA is a big dog. This is about money. And if they can, they're going to leverage it to themselves. Now, I'm not saying they don't care about kids and students, but in the end, this is billions and billions of dollars of revenue, and nobody wants to lose it. So I'm hopeful, as Representative Tapke said, we're going to keep this going and make sure the NCAA acts, and then we'll review it after that.
Yeah, any further questions? Did you have one earlier? Nope.
I did. I was just wondering, down the line, is there a chance that some schools will not be able to compete with other schools because there are going to be differences in compensation, non-compensation, or what if you don't like what the NCAA comes out with? Just down the line, I mean, what are some of the risks?
Yeah, absolutely, and that is a wonderful question. The way that I look at it is that we're setting up the framework, and it's up to the NCAA to fill in the details as to how all of this will work. We want there to be a wide solution that hits all universities across the United States. We've talked to, same as Senator Chamberlain, I've talked to many of the higher education systems, and they all have said that they're not opposed to this. They aren't going to come out in favor of it, but they're not opposed to it, and they really want there to be good solutions. And there's some legitimate concerns that come up with this, and that's what we need the NCAA to do really good work on, to find out how we maintain equity and how we make sure that especially the female athletes are taken care of through this entire process, so that everyone can equitably profit and move forward with it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.